Hi everyone, and welcome to Techweek TV, brought to you by Callaghan Innovation. Thanks so much for tuning in this afternoon. In this session we're going to be taking an inside look at Dunedin's thriving innovation hub, and I have some awesome people joining us on this panel. So first we have Eric Lloyd, who's the General Manager at Callaghan Innovation, Nigel Bamford, who's the CEO of ESCEA, Jesse Meek, founder of at Codelingo, and Ian Taylor, Managing Director at Animation Research. Hi everyone.
Hello.
G'day.
Hello.
How's everyone today?
Good.
Great, thanks.
All right, so Nigel, I'm going to kick off with you. Tell us about the high-tech manufacturing scene here in the Otago region, and maybe just give a bit of a background on what your company does too.
Sure. Well, I guess, Otago has always been a hub of manufacturing in this country going back 150 years. And, more recently, there's been, I guess, a bit of a changing of the guard. So some of the 100-year-old firms, for whatever reason, have ended up closing, leaving town, or whatever, and there's certainly a newer group of companies that are export-focused and quite tech-focused, and our company, ESCEA, is one of those. We launched our first fireplace, gas fireplace, about 15 years ago, and we've grown pretty steadily since then, exporting around Australia, a little bit into America. And basically we have 120 people in a pretty new building out in Green Island that we use for our innovation, our manufacturing, and generally trying to keep things humming here.
Am I right in thinking that you're being a little bit humble right now, and you're actually the biggest fireplace manufacturer in Australia and New Zealand?
Yeah, well, it's a Dunedin thing to be a little bit humble, right? We are pretty market leading what we do, and I was just recently at an American trade show, and I got to say we do things a lot better than they do as well. So yeah, we have some quite large global plans to export some of our technology to that market as well. Okay,
so we're in Tech Week. How did you get into fireplaces, and then as a New Zealander, and what was the fascination? And then also, how does your technology sort of relate to what we're talking about today?
Sure. Well, my first job was designing fireplaces for a company, and they were doing, I guess, in a bit of a low-tech way, and I saw an opportunity to do it in a high-tech way. Way back then, we had the world's first fireplace that you could turn on from your cell phone. That was a flip phone at that time, and we had to use a pager receiver, so every fire had a pager receiver in them. So it was a bit of a low-tech way of doing it, but we were the first in the world that you could actually open your phone and turn on your fireplace from anywhere. Then a bit later, we obviously updated our technology to be web-based and app-based. And so we've always had, in fact, we're actually the only fireplace manufacturer in the world that designs and builds their own circuitry. Everyone else just buys off-the-shelf stuff. So we've designed our own circuit board from day one, our own remote control and things, and that's essentially enabled us to build more beautiful products, certainly more efficient products, and it's even enabled us to scale our technology. So we can do fires now that are 2 meters wide, 1.5 meters high. We can do some pretty amazing things, which is all enabled by our technology.
Awesome. So how have you continued to innovate your product range over that time, and what's next?
Sure. So we've got a pretty big innovation team. We have, if you count interns, 12 people working full-time on R&D at our company. And so we are releasing 2 to 3 new products every year. We're now innovating beyond just gas. We're innovating into wood products, into electric fireplaces, quite a lot into outdoor fireplace cooking products. So yeah, we just keep widening the breadth of fireplaces that we apply our tech to.
Awesome. And I think everyone can jump in on this question as well. What are the benefits of running a successful business from a Dunedin base?
Sure. There's 100 benefits, and about the only bad side is you've got to take 2 flights to get out of here. That's about it. So if you stack up the fact that we spend a little bit longer on an airplane, that's a small price to pay for the benefits. So I mean, this is a 15-minute city. If people go out to do deliveries or pick something up or come to work, there's nowhere that's not 15 minutes. My competitors that build product in bigger cities, if someone goes out to pick up a box of screws, you'll see them 6 hours later, when they get back stuck in traffic. So yeah, there's certainly some efficiencies here. We've got space, we've got buildings, we've got a stable workforce, we've got people that love living here and stay here. I could go on for ages. There's heaps of reasons why this is a great place to do it.
Is there anything missing?
We'll get us direct international flights, and then it'll save me that hour and a half, and then I'm in heaven. There's not a lot. I mean, scale is one thing we do need. One of the reasons I've also involved in a few startup manufacturing businesses is I am a little concerned that the tech manufacturing sector needs a little bit of scale. It needs. It's great when we can people can leave one company and go and work for another, and subcontractors and people that sell us stuff can support a bigger industry. So there's sort of 3 or 4 of us doing interesting high-tech stuff, and it would be great if there was 7 or 8 or 10 of us is probably my only concern. And I think if we keep supporting the startup community and helping new young tech companies start, I think we'll fill that void.
So you're inviting other high-value manufacturing startups to move to Dunedin to work with you?
Yeah, and move is one question, but I guess most places tend to stay where they're born. So, I guess we're more focused on getting tech startups to be born here, knowing that they'll probably stay, because I think that's historically been a lot more successful than hoping that big companies don't tend to move around that much.
Awesome, thanks so much. Okay, let's have a look. Jesse, it's your turn. What's your elevator pitch for Codelingo?
Yeah, sure. So we help development teams write better code faster. We do that by finding and fixing issues in existing code, reviewing new code coming into that code base, and automatically writing contributor docs, so you transfer that knowledge to the whole team. We're less interested in applying industry standards and more interested in project-specific standards, so essentially unlocking the tacit knowledge of a development team that's worked on a code base for a long time and scaling that up to ensure that the whole team is on the same page as they're writing a very fast-moving code base.
So I know quite a bit about you. We've met quite a few times at the Q Landing Pad.
It's been quite the journey.
So technical debt is one of the biggest challenges in our community, as you know. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you're solving that problem?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been several reports over the years around technical debt. One of my favourite ones is called the Chaos Report. It was called the Chaos Report retrospectively. So it came out by the Standish Group back in 1996, I believe. They did an industry-wide survey to work out how many software projects were successful. Their definition of successful was on time, on budget, and met the requirements. They found at that time that 15% of all of the projects that they surveyed, I think it was between 8,000 and 9,000 projects, only 15% were successful. Fast forward to 2019, that number is now 30%. So even in this day and age, of every software project that is started, regardless of size of team or company, there's a 70% chance that it will fail. So it's a huge, huge issue. Gartner came out with a report in 2015 that estimated technical debt to reach a $1 trillion global problem. Stripe in 2018, September, came out with a lovely report called the Developer Coefficient, which estimates companies to spend $85 billion a year, one way or another, trying to maintain bad code or technical debt. So it's a huge, huge problem. And you're solving it from Dunedin? Yes, we are. How big's the team now? It's 8 now. Yep, that's right. So small by established company standards, but it's been really lovely to see it grow. This literally started with an idea in my head and a career worth of frustration and pain. And I stepped out of my career to tackle this problem, and it's been quite an exciting journey to ride this wave. Awesome. Okay, Erica. Let's have a look. So regional economics, so you're on the opposite side, working with all of these amazing companies and sort of arguably fueling their growth. Regional economic development growth is a key strategic focus for our current government through the Provincial Growth Fund. It has committed to investing $1 billion a year over 3 years for this. How are other initiatives like Callaghan Innovations' new Scale Up NZ free online platform designed to help regions like Dunedin?
I think the key word there is the online platform. So, I mean, people talk about New Zealand as being a small country with quite, rich communities, but we're actually quite long and skinny. And as far as the community goes, we're quite disconnected. So at Callaghan, we've, looking at research, had realised that one of the most useful things we could do was to build a platform which enabled all the businesses and the community, or the sort of innovation ecosystem, to live in one place. So that's what we did. We launched it a couple of weeks ago, and it's called Scale Up NZ. It's kind of like Callaghan's virtual self. Living on that platform are businesses that innovate, so we hope you guys will have your profiles on the platform, but also investors, hubs, incubators, accelerators, so that the whole ecosystem that works together to fuel that type of innovation is on a platform we can all find each other and solve that disconnect problem. How that relates to regions is hugely useful, because you'll be able to sort by all the company tags and geographic location. You'll be able to find out what clusters are happening in which area. So you'll be able to sort yourself by coding and Dunedin and whatever other tags, and come up with reports regionally. So we should be getting a real-time view of what's actually going on.
Awesome. And then just before we move on to Ian, can you talk a little bit around the types of things that Callaghan's doing to help companies like these guys grow and scale from Dunedin?
There's a whole heap and unwrapped that we've worked with everybody here. Mainly it's around support to accelerate what it is that you guys have got on your minds. So your R&D programs, obviously we help with grant funding, which will be replaced with a tax incentive. The project grants are still going ahead, so R&D projects will be continue to be supported by Callaghan Innovation. The other thing is the student grant program. So you guys have both probably had undergrads or master's students or PhDs working on your R&D programs for types of internships that we support as well. Beyond that, there's the support that we do through the economic development agencies regionally, who can come in and work with your businesses too. And anything else.
Awesome. Okay, just getting through these, and then we'll go into more of the Rust debate. Ian, your company Animation Research quickly became one of the top community animation companies in New Zealand, and is known internationally for its work, particularly in television advertising and sports graphics, notably I think golf and the America's Cup and the Ashes. You've been in operation for over 20 years and remain head office here in Dunedin. Do you want to tell us a little bit about some of the work you've been doing?
Well, actually, it's interesting. It's 30 years, and I guess we have a bit more simplistic view. I've never written a business plan, so I kind of look back over these things. And back in 1989, we decided that digital data would be the currency of the future, and we would turn that into pictures that people could understand. Now, a real business person would have gone, digital data will be the currency of the future, and we'll turn it into pictures that people will pay for. I never thought of that. What we did think of, though, as we looked around at the digital data, we thought we came up with another idea, was that our business strategy would be that we'd try to get to every really cool sports event in the world for free, and we'd use technology to do that. And we've been doing that ever since, well, for the past 30 years. And it's kind of interesting, I'd never heard those numbers of the failure rates. And I mean, the interesting thing, in our 30 years, we've never missed a single target, ever. But that comes from the fact that we started in television, and you cannot shift the starting date of the Olympics. You can't shift the first day of the Ashes. So it brings a different kind of... Well, actually, I also have to mention I have got 2 ESCEAs.
Well done.
Yes, I haven't forget that. But it brings a different kind of thinking to the way you do things. So the wonderful thing about having television as your background in technology is that the dates are immovable, and usually the budgets are unchangeable. They don't get to change. So it brings a different kind of mentality to the way you do things. So that when we started building the air traffic control simulators, when we started doing the stuff we're doing in prisons, it's still being run as though we have an on-air date and a limited budget, and then the thinking goes. I heard a terrible saying once from somebody who was trying to justify what they were doing, and they were asked, how long is it going to take? And this person said, well, it's technology. It takes as long as it takes. And that is probably one of the reasons the success rate's only 30%.
Can you talk a little bit more about what's your advice for startups building technology to be a little bit more to set firm deadlines and just to stick to them?
Well, actually, I'll answer that one. I guess that because of the way we work, that's just mandated. And the value of doing that is that we always start with that date, and we picture this is what is expected as the flames light for the opening of the Olympics. This is what's expected. Now we come back from there and go, how do we get to there efficiently, fast, and within this budget? If you leave it to the other end, where it's sort of this open-ended, it will just keep growing. Actually, it's interesting, you asked Nigel the advantages of living in Dunedin. I see all over the country people who love where they live. So that's the most important thing. Peter Jackson, and Richard Taylor built that empire in Wellington because they just weren't going anywhere. They decided. So back in 1989, we decided that we were going to start a tech company at the bottom of the world, couldn't get any further away, and actually it was immovable. We weren't going anywhere. Now, I have this other thing of trusting technology to be developed around you that will help you achieve goals. I always joke that you should never set a goal based on what you know, because if you did, you should be an accountant. What you do is you know that this stuff is coming. So the interesting thing about starting in 1989, I didn't discover this till much later, Tim Berners-Lee. 1989, Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. Now, that was the road that took us to the world. Everything we do, and the only way we could achieve our goal, was because some really clever guy somewhere else invented that highway to the world.
Awesome. Let's all jump in on Dunedin as a tech scene and what your impression of the startup and innovation scene here is.
I can kick that off. I guess the key thing to say to that is it's certainly not what it was 3 years ago. It's developing very quickly, and that's also consciously. I'm part of Startup Dunedin Trust, which is one of our driving organisations for the startup scene here, and we made a conscious observation that the tech scene and the startup scene in Dunedin was potentially falling behind the speed of progress of some other cities, and hundreds of reasons for that, but we've been kind of turning the handle as quick as we can, and so now we used to have no co-working spaces. Now we've got 3 pretty awesome ones. Maybe you could count a couple more. We used to have events that would have like 10 people turn up to them. Now we have events with 100, 150 people turning up to them. We used to have like 6 events a year. Now we have 10 events a month. So, and of course all that is great, but the real outcome you want is lots of startups, right? And lots of successful startups. But that is definitely happening. That the ecosystem is definitely building, the number of people starting up things, and of course for us the other key thing is successfully starting up. We get that failure is part of the process, and that's fine, and you can successfully fail and then you can successfully start again, and that's fine as well. But we are seeing some really great companies, some really great startups, and we'd love to see a few more build to a really big stage, and we'd love to see someone exit. And
can I ask you something?
Yeah.
You seem to have access to amazing skills down here. Is there enough? Have you got enough of the right type of skills?
Yeah, there's talent everywhere. It's just attracting it to be aimed at something or something else. So, we have University and Polytech with 25,000 smart people. We have other smart people in the workforce. It's just what they choose to put their time into. So, if we can make it normal to choose to put your time into an entrepreneurial startup, then it'll be a more common thing. And if it's something that only weirdos and eccentrics, like we might have been a few years ago, do, then of course you're going to get less people into it.
You make such a good point, because it does seem to be mainstreaming.
Yep,
yes, that's what we're trying to do.
Yep.
The comment again coming off Nigel's, this idea of one of the things about Dunedin, I guess, is that the first head. Dunedin is the city of firsts. First university, first public art gallery, first museum, first place in the country the telephone call was made. So we have this kind of in our blood, and it kind of faded away a bit, but now, you know, with the work that people like Nigel are doing, that concept is we are the city of first. But the other one was the handicap being travel, flight. So, I mean, just to put that in context, in the last 4 weeks I've been to the US and back 4 times. I leave on Monday again to go to Paris. I'll be back by Wednesday, here for 7 days, and back to the US after that. And it's really fun. You know, we think about technology as killing the tyranny of distance, but there's this other value in this sort of stuff. So if you start to think of it like that, everybody does it. And so that's not really a handicap, but a person who should be at this meeting. One of the things of startups is what we've consciously done is we've allowed every staff member, anyone in our company, to build startups while they're still working for us, and we encourage it. So Igtimi started inside of us. I think of their success as mine. So, you know, while we've stayed at our size, Igtimi's grown and has just won the Tech Award here. Chris Hinch used to work for us and designed the tracking company that works all around the world. And Ryan Baker, who I'd love to have here today, because Ryan Baker answers a lot of these questions that we're talking about. So Ryan and Andrew work for us as well. And we let them establish that business inside. We don't take any ownership of it. And they've gone out, and they're bigger than we are. They've got 80 staff, clients in 100 and something countries around the world, and no real office. And we talk about talent. Their talent is across a whole range of countries. You don't even need to be here anymore. And that's one of the things we need to be thinking about. That environment means, we bid for a regional development fund for the harbourside development, and one of the big questions was, how many jobs are you going to create in Dunedin? That's old-fashioned thinking. It's how many jobs are you going to create? Because if we want people to work at their best, they should be able to live where they choose to live. And the technology that we're discussing this week means we can be totally connected. Right now, the reason I was late coming across here is that I was on a machine sitting in our office in Dunedin, linked to a computer in Morocco in an OB truck while we animated stuff for them up there from Dunedin. And nobody even knows we're from Dunedin. So that's kind of where we need to be thinking as well.
I think on that note as well, it's, the future of work is here, it's not coming, and remote working is a thing. And for those of you watching that don't know who Ryan is, he runs a company called Timely. And so they've done an amazing job at just allowing people to work from wherever they want to work from. And I think that's what it is we've got all these places around the world, but people do associate their home with somewhere, whether that's their current home or where they want their home to be in. I mean, creating that amazing waterfront kind of stadium thing, I don't know what you call it, precinct that you were designing, there would be people in the world where that would be a destination for them to come to, because that's the environment that they want to be in. Right?
And the key, where the debate around that has got lost is it's not a building, it's not a harbourfront development. It is totally designed with the idea of sustainability. When we talked about 1989, digital data would be the currency of the future. The future of IT, IP, high-value IP is going to be sustainability. It will not go away, and it will just continue to grow. So if we are able to establish a university that is the centre of excellence for sustainability, it will attract people from everywhere. And they don't physically have to come, but they are starting to work into that place as a hub.
Just want to pick up on a bit of a theme that I've heard. So picking up on Ian's earlier comment around the fact that he isn't encountering this issue with software in the way that you execute, and that was essentially underpinned kind of around your culture, around how you think about the problem. I think that's 100% true in the software area. I think it's come to be accepted that software have bugs. It's come to be accepted that it's going to be late. It's come to be accepted that it's going to be over budget. And we even have kind of industries of thought now around that, so that kind of support that elongated process of software development. For example, like when Agile isn't implemented properly and you have these sprints, you kind of have this kind of timeless cycle of software, and there's no kind of real hard deadlines. I think a similar phenomena is going on when it comes to Dunedin. I don't think that the limitations that we're hitting are logistical. I think they're much more cultural. When I first started this company, I quit my job and started it. It was very, very early on. I was completely unknown.
How are you brave enough to do that?
That's another story. Let me finish this point and I'll circle back to that. When we first started, I just did a very small... Okay, so to give it context, I quit my job. I gave myself 3 months holiday from work and said, okay, can I find enough angel money to start this company off? A week before I had to go back to work, I managed to close my round. That gave me enough to pay myself and one other developer to get it off the ground. Completely unknown, very small amount of capital. I put a job ad out to advertise for a developer to come and join us. We got applications from engineers from NASA, from Google, from several top-tier IT companies around the globe. There's a huge attraction to New Zealand from around the world. So I think the problem really is our self-identity and how we think about ourselves, not necessarily overcome any logistics or even promoting ourselves in the right way to New Zealand. It's actually we need to promote ourselves the right way to ourselves. Another lovely example is Ryan Baker. I remember years ago I was working on a side project and he came around, first time I met him, and he's saying, oh yeah, I've got this, just got this idea around writing a time management app for hair salons. And it was just an idea, just like me. And I was saying, yeah, oh yeah, this is what I'm working on. At that time was this Inspirogram thing, which was an AI that automatically creates images and quotes. It's just a little side project we had. So we just had a little chat and he's like, oh yeah. And so I'm just going around and doing a bit of validation and talking to some businesses. And that story now is, as you say, 80 staff, it's a force to be reckoned with.
We do need to put that in context because Brian and Andrew built Book It.
Of course, everyone has a history.
We had just sold that
right.
to trade. So he had a little bit more luxury around him than you had.
Of course. Yeah. But what I'm trying to say is that we need to start normalising these stories because so often I see people that they're fighting against themselves. There's a part of them that sees this like opportunity and potential and this spark, and then there's another part of them that's saying like, oh, but I can't do that. Oh, we're in Dunedin.
Also on that note, you've got a whole bunch of everyone else who you talk to who's not an entrepreneur, doesn't understand the world. They're like, that's a stupid idea, don't do it, it's so risky. And the more no's you get, or the more of those like, what are you thinking, you're weird, you're crazy. I think we all have enough insecurities ourselves, and You're like, maybe they're right, maybe they're right, maybe they're right. And then there's a point at which you kind of want to go, actually, maybe they're wrong and I should just do this anyways. So it's about normalising the response too.
And I mean, we're seeing a couple of different themes coming out of this conversation. One is it used to be the kind of old school idea that you would make something and validate it here first, and if no one was mean to you, you might take it someplace else, right? So you were brave enough. If it worked in the NZ, then you could maybe go to Sydney or go somewhere else. But there's this whole new breed of entrepreneurs that we're seeing coming through who are just bypassing geography completely. And if their market is Berlin, that's where they're going, or if it's Tokyo, that's where they're going. And I think your cultural point is incredibly on point, but there's also a counterweight of some people who are not afflicted in the same way, and I'm thinking further down the generations. They don't have the same cultural kind of baggage that maybe we've all had to deal with. Shahan?
Yeah. Did you want to jump in on that, Ian?
Well, I mean, we may be different. I mean, we've never had a round. We've never borrowed money. I mean, anything we've done, we've gone two things. We've borrowed it from the bank and done it, or we've cash flowed it ourselves. And I am absolutely certain we would not be doing the stuff we're doing today if we'd taken funding rounds. So Callaghan and MSI before it have been absolutely critical in the way we've moved forward. What we've seen lately, and this is a Callaghan discussion, I guess, is that those organisations aren't able to keep up with the speed that we move at. Yeah. So it might even be a little bit more in your case, even in the kind of manufacturing, there's a little bit more time and process that you can do. But an example of our sort of stuff is that we will have an idea, an opportunity, and it will be executed in 7 weeks or 6 weeks. And the idea will come on a phone call that just happened. And we then commit quite a bit of money to going for it. And what we've been discussing, we had a great example of it with NZTE, where we finally got them to say, we said, look, this opportunity starts now. We aren't going to apply. We'll apply later. We haven't got time to fill in your forms. We're going for it. But if we apply and you can still say no, and we will have spent our money, so that's how convinced we are, can we go back to that date? Just as simple as that. And they said yes. And it made an enormous difference.
I hear you.
And it still gives everybody the freedom. You know, we know that's not a commitment from Callaghan or anywhere. We could come to them and say, well, we're applying, yeah, you don't qualify. But this one was amazing. The application was for something like $200,000 if we applied. By the time we applied, it was worth 3.2 million, and that happened in less than 6 months. That's the speed.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good point. I was thinking about this as I was driving in as well, because obviously NZT and Callaghan have been vital for this journey, and I was thinking, well, why exactly were they vital? And I think when you first start an endeavour like this, the cash is very, very tempting. I thought, oh, if I can only get my hands on that. Like the first, like we won the Gigatown grant, and it was like 20K, and it made all the difference at the time. And then like a year ago, you know, we raised like 500K, and now that doesn't seem like much, but that was all the difference at the time. And now we're kind of, the scale keeps moving up. But I think it's what's really, really important is to realise that taking on money of any sort that's outside of your core business is essentially like simple carbs. You want to get off them as quick as possible. Like they give you a short kind of energy boost, but you need to use them strategically. And what's super important is for NZTE and Callaghan to be able to be really responsive and really timely, because that was key for us as well. It wasn't the cash; it was actually the cash at that particular time. Just gave us the ability to hit a few more extra goals to secure the next.
I understand, and I'm hearing loud and clear about the desire, and trust me, we have it ourselves, is to be able to work at the same pace, the same tempo as our customers and businesses we work at. I mean, as a public sector entity, we're breaking ourselves to try and do that. We're not trying.
I was on the MSI board, which was the board before Callaghan, and I always argued, I really believed that MSI and Callaghan needed to have something like a $5 million or a $10 million fund that they expected to lose every year, so that your 20,000, you didn't have to fill out reports, you didn't have to fill out, you just had to do the sell to somebody who had the authority to go, actually,
there's a window of opportunity
really
here.
Idea.
We need 20K.
You don't have to put in any money.
You guys are going to make me want to talk about the R&D tax incentive.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that now. So let's talk about the R&D tax
Then we'll get to
incentive.
talk about the idea of tax rebates.
We probably maybe not that one.
Yep.
Can we talk about the R&D tax incentive and the second round of policy work underway to help pre-revenue companies and others?
I can talk about it briefly.
Yes.
So if you are conducting R&D, you want to start recording that effort right now from previous April 1st with the idea of being able to apply for a tax incentive back on that R&D effort. Our Minister Megan Woods announced this a little while ago that there was an extra $1 billion tipped into the R&D bucket because we had a significant issue. Right now, I think New Zealand businesses invest, their business expenditure, on R&D is about 1.3 to 1.6% of our GDP, which has us kind of languishing down the OECD with company we don't really want to compare ourselves with. The goal is to try and get us up to 2% by 2050, which is going to mean a significant dig in by everyone involved. So businesses' expenditure is going to have to go up.
See, it's an interesting thing. This has always been a bugbear for me.
Get in there.
Yeah. It's when we look at that 1 or 1.2%, it's because of the definition of R&D. I mean, the R&D definition sounds like it was written by accountants to corral stuff. Everything we do across the road is R&D, and because we do it every day around it, it gets described as business as usual. And if it's BAU, and I think the times have moved, so we can have all these great discussions about tax incentives and all of this sort of stuff. But if we don't redefine what R&D is, so that it doesn't fall in that. It should be the results of what you do, not the description of what you do.
I understand, and there's a couple of things that's very interesting from a sort of Venn diagram perspective. You've got R&D and you've got innovation. There's a shared space, but they are not the same thing.
Awesome.
The problem with incentives, any incentive structure, is that you're going to encourage the behaviour that you incentivize. And so you have to be very, very conscious about what kind of behaviour you're actually
Do you think we can
encouraging.
control any of you people at all? Are you serious?
There's always a tendency to game the system, that's what I'm saying. If you could incentivise with the end goal,
I'd like
then
to
you
think we had that sort of power, but we bloody well don't.
I think I'm going to move on from here, otherwise we'll keep talking about tax and R&D. So I do want to know from you, Erica, what's the pilot capital education program? Because I've heard that capital in Dunedin is actually quite hard to come by. If you're not already established, it is slowly not becoming a problem, but I do want to know what that
It's
is.
one of the programs that we're running through our sector's business, which I look after, which is you can access it through your local economic development partner agency. But I'd be more interested to know if the capital issue is a really significant one, because I know that there's a couple of interesting things underway, like with Todd. Conversations about whether or not capital is a constraint down here.
I know that you definitely found that, Jessie, right? When you were raising your round in New Zealand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Codelingo was intended to be a venture-led high growth company from the start. So very, very opposite to your strategy, Ian. Investment from day one. The goal was to align with a VC and to grow quickly and try to make a big impact across a large industry very quickly. So that was the idea. What I've discovered is that there are different cultures of investment, from New Zealand to Australia to the US. So when I first started here, this was about 3 years ago. I was very frustrated because it was a very young ecosystem here, and I felt there wasn't much perspective or support on the side of the founder. So there was an established ecosystem that was serving the investors. There was really no established ecosystem to kind of guide the founder. Is this deal that's on my page, on the table in front of me here, is that fair? Is it not? Should I push back? I have no context, you know, like, am I being, done over here or not? So that was quite frustrating, and that's something now, going through all of that, I'd love to give back and try to get a bit more support on the founder side as well, just make sure that there's a bit of an equal tension. And I acknowledge that one of my investors is sitting right here next to me, which is Nigel, so that's an essential component of this play. And I 100% value and respect all of the investors that have come in, but you need a healthy tension in these processes. And we need to do better on the founder side.
Trying to create within the ecosystem, because if an entrepreneur is surrounded by other entrepreneurs who are 1 or 2 years ahead, 1 or 2 years behind, then all those conversations become easy. And even the advisors you have, the lawyers and the accountants, if the guys in town are dealing with startup all the time, then they've got standard term sheets, and the maths is all pretty standard. I mean, to a certain extent, developing the investor community is actually the hardest, and probably quite appropriately so, that the last part of building the ecosystem, because essentially, what generally happens if you look at the successful sort of Californian, even Boulder, Colorado, there's any of the ones that are really kind of out there ecosystems right now. It was actually about year 10 when they had their first round of entrepreneurs who got their startup and listed it, or did like $100 million exit or something. Which then went back and created most of these VCs or most of these seed investment guys. And so we kind of need a few more of those. We've got a lot of people who I think ultimately could do $100 million exits in this city right now, but because of the very fact it takes 5, 7, 10 years for that to happen, none of them have. Or maybe that's not true. We have 1 or 2. But actually getting them, what will naturally happen then is a lot of those people will then become the kind of investor that you're meeting when you go to Sydney and when you go to California. And I think we're going to, what we're trying to do at Startup Dunedin is make sure we're pulling those people together, we're getting a few of the, let's call it, more established, more, I don't know, maybe old-fashioned investors to put a little bit of their portfolio into startup, and we've had some good success. We've had success of people who have got large wealth in property and farming and things, and we've convinced them to put a little bit of their money into startups. So it's certainly rolling, but we need a couple of those big exits before it really rolls.
This is not just a Dunedin problem, but it's a bit of a New Zealand problem. And I think, so I used to live in San Francisco, and everyone was like, let's be Silicon Valley, and I was like, well, actually, let's not. Let's do what we do well, really well. And on top of that, I think the variable that everyone doesn't pay attention to is time. sometimes it just does take time. And our ecosystem is like 25 years old, which means we've had 2 realistic cycles. So people know it takes about 5 years to build a good business, and then like 10 years for it to, really kind of go for it.
So I'd like to bring a Māori perspective to that, because we're 30 years down the track, and we are a 30-year startup. I've often heard in some discussions among Māori, any business plan has to be 200 years. It has to look out, and this environment doesn't work for that. And I share the conflict between the investors. I had this discussion with Ryan a couple of days ago. I'm not sure if he'll thank me for repeating it, but we were talking about the fact that his major investor has 16%, one person on the board, and they always seem to be answering to that. What will they think? What will they do? What will they? And I just said to Ryan, Ryan, it's your company. They have one board member. Start running it like it's yours.
Yep.
If I could just jump forward, because again, maybe it's because we've had 30 years and managed to survive that we can have the luxury of this. But I've stayed away from that investment, and I agree we should never liken ourselves to Silicon Valley, which is why we've set up a company here that's just called Tech for Good. Now, Tech for Good, the first 2 examples of it, and we are funding entirely internally. The first one is the numeracy and literacy program we're doing in prisons. And the really cool, we discussed this with Māori iwi, my iwi, who are helping with it, and Michael Guthrie here in Dunedin, who's had one of those big exits. But the reason for this isn't financial. The why we have for this is those Māori people in there are our people, and we are going to get them out. And everything else works from there. I always argue if you have the right why, the how is really easy. So that was our why. So it took probably 15 minutes to convince Michael that this why was worth his investment. Now let's get on with it. The other one we're doing is medical VR at Christchurch Hospital, all funded again internally here. The why is because kids between the ages of 2 and 10, 60% of them get drugs that are dangerous for them. We are going to stop that. It's the why. And again, the how works itself out.
Ian, I want to kind of come back to you. So congratulations, first of all, for being named the 2019 Innovator of the Year in New Zealand.
I have to be clear of that. It had Ian Taylor and Animation Research, and I was absolutely gobsmacked. I mean, the two competitors, but I think this is important to get across. When I talked to the judges, I said, I haven't done anything this year, and said, no, it's actually for you and the team and everything you've done for 30 years. And then I was really proud of it.
Awesome.
Can you tell us a little bit more about specifically the Māori-led innovation that's going on in the Otago region?
I don't know a lot about it. I mean, the sort of where we stay. It's kind of interesting. Now I'm probably going to get into trouble here, but one of my real frustrations is we talk about this Māori economic engine that's worth $40 billion. It continues, well, from where I sit, it seems to continue to invest in the things that they know. Land, primary industries, tourism. I get really excited about tourism, most of which create low-value jobs. I'm really appalled that an investment should be made in a place where the payment of nurses and carers is at such a low level. If we are who we are, those investments should be going into places where we are talking about high-value jobs, and that's a discussion and an argument that continues ongoing. And the idea for the prisons one is that our goal isn't just to get the prisoners out; it's to build a high-tech company that has a Māori kaupapa to it, that is then creating jobs of computer programmers, computer designers, modelers. It goes right across the range.
And I mean, Ian, we're seeing at Callaghan the growth in Māori-owned digital companies is well out of proportion, for example.
Yes, and I think actually the really, if I shifted past Otago, so we introduced the Māori Award into the High Tech Awards 4 years ago, I think it was. It's now Callaghan. That industry, that whole Māori initiative is really, really growing across the country, and that's something we can be really proud of.
And multi-sector too, Ian, this is what we're seeing, is that It's not really specific in any one traditional sector.
I think the problem, we have this saying in Māoridom that the kumara never talks about its weakness. We have to get past that. The kumara has to start. Because how are we
mentioning its sweetness a little bit?
How do we start bringing our rangatahi through if they don't have these models and this pride?
One of the fascinating things that we've been seeing is going beyond what you were just talking about, where the Māori industry wants to go direct to consumer, and so they're starting to dabble in the e-commerce space so that they can do that, but then the skills weren't there, and so there's some work going on in the background where we're trying to bring in like the Shopifys and those sorts of engines, so then we can create this platform so that we can get New Zealand to the world, which is this entire, it's like all of us really getting to the world and like kind of creating more high value kind of product and jobs and getting it out there and getting rid of the intermediaries, which has been part of the problem in the past, I think, that we've seen.
I think we have a huge cultural arbitrage that we're not leveraging properly on the international stage. So through my journey, I've come across this attitude again and again that, we're not economically as big as America. We're not as economically set up as Sydney or London. We could never compete with their type of ecosystem, in terms of startups and companies. And I'm always reminded of the All Blacks when they do the haka. It doesn't matter the size of the country that they're fighting against. The other team is sitting there looking like idiots. And we're sitting there, center of the world. Everybody knows All Blacks. Everybody knows haka. I think it's those types of stories, and we need to start looking internally for identity and then externally for partnership. And I think a lot of the time we do the opposite, where we try to find out who are we, what could we be, let's see what other people have done, let's try to emulate their success, let's try to find our identity in San Francisco. And I think it's backwards.
I think I've seen that change even in the startups I've been watching in Dunedin over the last 5 years, that products always used to, and services or software always used to be built based on I know a farmer down the road that might need this technology, or a dairy factory down the road we could try this on. That's great, and there's probably certainly some room for agri-tech sort of things that can go really well out of here, but we're also seeing a lot of people who are essentially born global, who have got ideas that really, when they draw their graph of where they think their sales are going to be in 5 years' time, New Zealand may not even be on there. And from an investment point of view, when I look at a company like Codelingo to invest in, then anyone who has a too big a New Zealand bar in their bar graph of where they think their market's going to come from worries me a little bit, that the company can suffer from some of the small thinking, small culture, whatever. But whenever I see people who have got a product or a service that is completely international, and their focus is completely international, and they'll go where the customer is, that's investable.
This is why I think Dunedin is actually one of New Zealand's best kept secrets. And I know that it's not really about like being in a physical place, but when I came down here a couple of years ago, I realised that everyone here didn't really care what the rest of New Zealand were doing, because 99% of their customers were overseas, and that's why we didn't know about anyone down here, because they just were like, well, we're at the bottom of the earth, so we're just going to go to the world from here. And then that's, you've got buildings of people and innovators that have hundreds of staff, and there's lots of companies relative, probably per capita for Dunedin to the rest of the country. And that's always been super impressive to me. And I kind of wonder, how does that culture and mindset, how do we kind of get that out to other regions in New Zealand and other kind of everyone in our country, and just be like, let's just forget about the smallness and just go do our vision and be the best in whatever it is our field, whether that's, fixing code or fireplaces, or I don't even know how to describe your research because there's so much of it, Ian. So many different things. The last kind of question I have, if we could just be kind of quick on it, is how do you bring culture into your work?
Well, I think for our company it's been about having really clear values. We did a really good session actually with the NZT in the Better by Design program, maybe 8 years ago or something. I think we were one of the pilots for that. And since they helped us, workshop some really good vision, values, and purpose, and we have those hanging in massive big banners in the factory, and they're basically printed on the wall of all of our rooms. And then we just spend our time reinforcing that same thing and essentially creating what is an ESCEA culture, not necessarily Dunedin or a tech or anything. It's what is a pure ESCEA culture. And I guess when you're really consistent about that over a long period of time, it just happens, and you almost don't need to teach new people when they come in. They just absorb by osmosis what the culture and the company they're in.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I mean, if I look back at our company, we just value. We only do what we like. We don't do anything we don't like. And I look back over 30 years. Every person who started with me 30 years ago is still there. I have never laid off anyone. And this might seem odd, but again, this is a personal. I look at CEO salaries and the debate, and the big debate with Abigail Disney, I think it is. That crazy $60 million bonus and stuff. Well, I've operated on a philosophy. I don't share it, but I just think that this is the time to do it. I operate on a philosophy. 18 years ago, I decided that my people weren't being paid what they were worth because of the business, the way we were running. So 18 years ago, I made a vow that I would not take a pay rise until they were. I am still on the same pay that I was 18 years ago because I look at this incredible team and I still don't believe I pay them what they're worth. And the measure of success will be the day when I can give myself a pay rise.
Nice one.
That's awesome. So for me, I'm a sole founder, early stage startup. So I think you can't help but influence the culture at the very early stage. And what that forces you to be as a founder is very self-aware. I heard a quote once that the worst aspects of a company is a reflection of those parts of the founder or the leader that they're not aware of or that they don't want to look at. So I think that's something to be very, very, very aware of. And then what's interesting now, we're 8 now, but it's no longer my company, it's no longer my culture. So the culture is starting to be an emergent property of more people, and there's always compromise. There's different values and different natures, and I think if a healthy culture is one that can incorporate all of those, and then as the company becomes bigger, those relationships aren't just between the employees, it's also between the employees and the investors and the clients, and then the town that you're in and the country that you're in and the world that you're in. But I think it's a constant, once again, I think there's a constant need for tension and self-awareness and reevaluation of, what is the story when people think of Codelingo and you're not in the room? What story do they tell about you?
Yeah, on that note, I think it's more about show, not tell, isn't it? And it's actually what you do that demonstrates your culture. And for us at Callaghan, it's the idea of trying to enable you people who do the brave, hard work to be able to go faster. So I understand we've got some way to go, to try and break down some of the obstacles that are right in your way and see what other layers of enablement we can put in there. I mean, it probably leads us to where we're going to close out the...
I just want to do one more thing.
Oh yeah, you do that.
Just one kind of, you're all growing businesses or fueling business or working on innovation. I would like to know the thing you're most excited about that you're innovating on right now that will be the next thing that will take New Zealand by storm, or your businesses by storm. New product or way. Do you want to go? You feel like you've just got one ready.
Yeah, look at that smile.
Huge smile.
I can't tell you all our super secrets.
Yeah, right. I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, look, we are looking at ways of applying our tech to not just we do a lot of work in gas fireplaces. We've sort of doubled the efficiency of almost the category. When we started, fireplaces were about 40% efficient. We've made ones that are 90 now and dragged everyone else along with us. And we're now looking at how we can apply that to other parts of the fireplace game. And that is pretty exciting.
Yeah.
I don't think I have. I go to work and I'm excited every day by what I see. And just one example, 3 weeks ago we were given this problem. We were meant to work with an Israeli high-tech company. CBS had found them, blah, blah, blah. They did all this stuff. And we looked at the technology, and Chris Haig, one of our programmers, went, that's a really expensive way to do that. I can do it a different way. And in under 3 weeks, he delivered something last Saturday that had never been done before. And I mean, if we planned it, I suppose we'd get excited about it, but we now expect all of those exciting things every day. Probably the most exciting thing that's happening is in the prisons and the hospitals. Probably the prisons, because it's a different perspective. In the prisons, we are now finding that these prisoners are acting as consultants to us. They are coming up with amazing ideas. And one prisoner who was about to be released went to the controllers, whatever it is, and said, when I get out, how can I carry on the numeracy and literacy? That has never, ever happened. So I guess if we want to get excited about something, I'm really excited about the concept of tech for good.
It's really interesting. So along a similar line, it's not so much a new technical innovation that I'm excited about, but that we're actually proving our thesis. So for the past 2.5 months, we've had a kind of a product market fit campaign focusing on the developer community around GitHub. For those 2.5 months, we've experienced 50% week-on-week growth, and that's super exciting. So now this is no longer just an idea. It's no longer, we've kind of transformed from like this kind of academic project and a thesis on the impact we can make into an industry into the start of a community. And I think that's it's kind of like seeing your child take the first steps and realizing, oh my gosh, this thing has a life of its own.
Yes, to being right.
Well done.
Yeah.
Okay, for those of you watching, thank you so much for tuning in, and I would encourage you to go look at all of these amazing businesses and also check out Callaghan Innovation. I'm going to hand over to you.
Thanks so much, Sean. God, it's been a privilege. If I think of anything exciting that's on my radar, it's every day I get to see incredible businesses that make me want to kind of quit my job to go work for them. But if I did, then I wouldn't be able to do my job and see the incredible businesses.
We need you where you are.
Yeah. So I'm going to stay where I am, but it's incredibly exciting time to be in this position with startups, which lets me close out on the video that we made to share what we're up to at Callaghan Innovation to support and fuel the ecosystem, which is our scale-up platform.
If I had a mission statement for New Zealand, it would be a place where talent can thrive.